Well, it was a nice vacation while it lasted, but once again, fate, and my penchant for covering this story in complete chronological order, has led me back to the Knuckles comic, aka Penders' Playground. After the disappointing summation of the plot back in the Sonic book, I am cautious but interested in seeing where we're going to go from here. I can say that I do think that this cover is really well done, once again. At the very least, it continues giving us some decent color to look at, and I do like Knuckles' look on this cover, standing over a procession of rather haggard-looking earthbound echidnas with some very disturbing-looking bare feet. Seriously, I will never get over how creepy early Sonic character feet looked during the brief periods where we saw them without footwear on. Also, the Chaotix out there in the background looking weird as heck, with Charmy trying to show off just how flexible he is. We open on a couple of copy and pasted panels of Aether meditating while we're presented with what looks like a Bible verse from the Tome of Prophecies, saying that a guardian will be raised to a higher plane, and a new leader shall come to lead someone to the journey's end. When he awakens, we see that he's been leading a large wagon procession of echidnas on the planet's surface, and that they've been looking for refuge for quite a long time now. And boy, look at all these Knuckles clones. I mean, even the character Aether is talking to here, Yanar, is basically just Knuckles without the hand spikes and wearing a furry vest. Aether says that he needs to leave the procession, as he is needed elsewhere, and Yanar will have to take over leading them to where they need to go. He muses to himself that Yanar is not quite ready, but he has no choice in the matter, as the ancient walkers are calling him away. And then we cut to Lorelei praying in what is very clearly a church, though it's referred to as an aurorium here, before walking outside to find Knuckles waiting for her. He decides to walk her home, but when asked about why he didn't enter the aurorium himself, Knuckles admits he didn't feel comfortable going in there, to which Laura says she's not surprised, considering that he was raised outside of Echidnopolis. She notes that her father never taught him the tomes, though Knuckles says that he was taught a lot about history, responsibility, character, ethics, and so on. His mother basically says that he was taught to be a guardian, something that she resents because it cost Knuckles his childhood and any chance to be a regular boy that he might have had. As they enter her apartment, though, an off-screen presence tells her that Knuckles was never like other boys from the moment he was born, as Knuckles points at the unwelcome guest and demands to know how he got in there. We cut over to the police station where Julie Sue is being interrogated. She argues that she helped keep Kragok from getting away, and that should count for something, but given the mountain of overwhelming evidence that she was acting as an agent for the Legion, it doesn't really help her case much. When she tries to get them to ask Knuckles, hoping he'd vouch for her, Remington informs her that Knuckles' time being cosmically torn apart and then reassembled has scrambled his memory a little bit, and he doesn't remember much of his recent encounter with Enerjack. Remington leaves her to contemplate just how screwed she is, and I will give the art this, it does a very good job of showing just how much she's regretting her recent life choices. That's for sure. Back with Knuckles and Lorelei, they are greeted by Aether, who Laura greets rather fondly. At least I think that's what she's doing here. She kind of looks like she's having an out-of-body experience at the moment. When Knuckles starts to get hostile, however, Laura orders him to show a bit more proper respect to the old man, who says that it is the time of prophecy and he needs Knuckles to come with him. Knuckles initially refuses, saying that he's busy enough as it is with everything else going on in his life. Tell me about it. But Aether doesn't give him much choice, as he and the walkers teleport away with Knuckles in tow, leaving Lorelei alone. Cut back to the station where Remington is hard at work doing his job when Archimedes shows up, asking if he's seen Knuckles, as he can't seem to find him anywhere, something that he feels is rather unusual since he's never really had this problem before. Before he goes, however, Remington stops him, as he wants to ask him a few questions concerning Julie Sue. Back with Knuckles and Aether, they're on a cliff overlooking the Echidna procession. Knuckles asks how this can be, and Aether gives us a lengthy flashback back to the time before the floating isle started to float. There was actually a large contingent of echidnas who were against the idea of raising the island above the clouds. and so they were allowed to leave the city before it was detached from the ground, in an honestly much more gentle and understanding fashion than any encounters we've seen between the various different factions up until this point. So they left, looking for a place to call their own home, and they've yet to find it, as every place they've tried to settle before this has either been settled already, or was hostile to their presence. Eventually, they had to leave behind their vehicles and their tech, as most of it just broke down and they didn't have the means to repair it. They just decided to leave it all behind, deciding that it might be better to not become reliant on technology from there on out, making them more true to their more humble ideas of giving up technology than the rest of Echidna culture so far. Arrakis, the leader of this tribe, receives an epiphany from the ancient walkers, who from then on seem to help guide the tribe in looking for a new place to call home. When Knuckles points out that this setup here sounds similar to the Guardians, with Arrakis handing down his duties as leader to his son and so forth, Athair points out a very important difference. Arrakis' tribe does not require blood relation to take up the mantle as their leader or guide, whereas with the Guardians, only one specific bloodline may become a part of them. And we cut away from that rather heavy topic to a diner at Echidnopolis, where the Chaotix are busy not being important to the story. So basically their usual existence in this book then. They're arguing about Julie Sue yet again, with Vector convinced that she was setting them up from the beginning, though both Mighty and Espio are willing to give her some leeway, considering that she didn't kill them when she had the chance, even though she very easily could have, merely knocking them out. Charmy breaks up the argument before things start to get ugly, telling them all that Remington needs to see them immediately. After that scene, we cut back to the Arrakis tribe as Yanar tries to push everyone forward. But before Athair can continue telling Knuckles what he needs to know, he stops, saying that something's wrong, and that it might just be the Day of Fury that their prophecies predicted. Yanar seems to have the same idea, and he urges everyone to try and get to higher ground. And then all hell breaks loose, as a rumbling in the ground signals the earth breaking apart and lava starting to bubble up. Knuckles manages to save one of the Echidnas from falling into the magma, with Athair noting that there isn't any safe place anywhere on the planet's surface right now. And as we get several panels showing off terrifying sudden weather patterns all over Mobius, Athair tells Knuckles that they were given 3 tomes of prophecies to study, and that they say that the Day of Fury is the Earth's way of readjusting itself to changes it goes through after a certain duration, with the last one having occurred about 1200 years ago. When Knuckles asks how they survived back then, Athair says that most didn't. But Knuckles isn't ready to say it's a lost cause yet, ending the issue by saying that there's got to be something they can do about this. I once again find myself torn. The issue's story, for the most part, is decent on its own, all things considered. I like that we're getting some follow-up with Julie Sue, at least. But when you take this with everything that's come before and everything it's piling on now, it's kind of hard to keep track of. With the introduction of Arrakis' tribe, we're now up to 4 distinct different factions connected to the floating islands. There's the Guardians, the Dingoes, the Dark Legion, and now this traveling tribe. Add to it, we still have a ton of unanswered questions from previous issues that still haven't been cleared up, and yet here comes this issue introducing yet another layer of complexity on top of the Echidna backstory we already have to keep track of, while also throwing on this sort of pseudo-religious feel that feels kind of out of place, honestly. Okay, yes, this is a world where a lot of magical shit happens all the time, and the ancient walkers themselves are pretty much mystic spirits, and it won't be much longer before literal gods start to manifest themselves in the series. But at the same time, it still feels really weird, this sudden introduction of the tomes as an allegory for the Bible, the Aurorium churches. It's a really weird direction to take. When you combine that with the fact that Ken can't seem to keep the theming straight when it comes to trying to balance all of these various factions and their motives and ideals, I can very easily see this all coming apart at the seams very quickly. Now, I will give it some credit. Unlike a lot of the rest of the Echidna stuff, it didn't beat around the bush with this. It introduced the concepts early on in the issue, and actually did its best to give us all the relevant information by its ending pages. Of course, it doesn't answer all of the questions that we may have about Athair, or the Walkers, or the tribe, but maybe that'll come next issue? But given the very sudden appearance of this whole Day of Fury thing at the end, yeah, that moved a little too fast for me, especially considering it's something that's happening worldwide, apparently. Right now, I just don't know what to think of this story and the things that it introduces, and I can't say I'm feeling very positive about them. Art-wise, we have Manny Galan, Andrew Papoy, and Barry Grossman as penciler, inker, and colorist respectively. And the art pretty much matches my feelings on the story here. There is some good, solid work here. I'm particularly fond of the scene with Julie Sue, because it conveys a lot of good emotion in her, showing that she knows she's pretty much blown her chance, and things are looking grim for her. There's honestly a lot of great expression work in the issue overall, that conveys some good insight into what the characters are thinking and feeling. But then there's also a lot that looks way too exaggerated or even a bit off model at times, particularly when we get a lot of wide mouth syndrome. There's also a lot of copying and pasting of characters too, though that's mostly at the beginning of the book, but it's frequent enough to be noticed. If it isn't the whole panel being copied, it's generally a character's pose from panel to panel, which makes the whole thing look really awkward. I am very hesitant to move on at this point because I have no idea where this is going. Generally, I kind of like the idea of stepping into the unknown, especially for a series I haven't read in so long. But given Ken's track record so far, I don't know how this is going to pan out, but I don't have much hope. If it isn't obvious, this is the point where the Knuckles book sort of starts collapsing under its own ambitions. And we'll see where those ambitions lead when we jump back in with Knuckles the Echidna, issue 11. I'll see you next time, everyone.